How is the Slight Reliability podcast going? What are the stats and how do I feel about it? I'll be covering all that and more in today's retrospective of the Slight Reliability podcast. Welcome to Slight Reliability, the show where we learn about reliability, observability, and resilience one day at a time. I'm your host, Stephen Townsend. So in my team at work, we every 2 weeks do a sprint retrospective. And in that, it's probably the highlight of my week when it happens. We come together as a team and we share how we're going. You know, what's going well, what's not going well, what have we enjoyed, what are the challenges, what are we worried about, how are we feeling, and how can we be better tomorrow? So I thought by myself and with you, I would do a retrospective of this podcast. How is it going? And the first thing we do as a team in every retrospective is we have a mood check-in to find out how people are feeling, right? So how am I feeling today? I'm feeling okay. I'm more tired than normal. And I think in my current role for the last couple of years, the cognitive load is quite high. It is exceptionally high at the moment, to the point I'm often paralyzed in terms of, there's so many competing important priorities. Which one do I do? And how do I focus on this particular really important creative thing when my head is just so far afield, you know? So I'm feeling a bit frazzled, but I'm okay. And I'm actually really excited to do this retrospective. So what about the data? You know, what is the reach of this podcast? You know, how's it going? I'm going to be honest about the numbers here. So here are some numbers I captured as of recording this episode. So the numbers might be a bit different by the time you listen. I've produced 103 episodes. 56 unique guests from around the world have been on the show. In terms of the numbers, the podcast is consumed in two different ways, and I upload it in two different places. The audio only or traditional podcast version goes on Buzzsprout and then is indexed by podcast apps like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And then there's the video version of the recording, which goes on YouTube, right? Buzzsprout, or the audio-only podcast, has 30,000 episode downloads over the life of the podcast. On YouTube, I have 1.8 thousand subscribers. There are 44,000 views, but that includes shorts and other videos which are not specifically podcast episodes. Each episode, the audio-only version gets about 200 to 300 downloads in the first month. The video YouTube version gets anywhere from 50 to 400 views on YouTube in the first month. So it kind of ranges from 250 to 750 people are consuming the podcast in some way in the first month, which isn't huge numbers, but probably on average, it's looking at about 350 to 400 people consuming most of the time at the average episode in that first month. So yeah, though I'd like the numbers to be higher, and that's something I'll talk about in the retro. Here's another number. I'm paying about 100 New Zealand dollars or 60 US dollars a month on tooling. So that's predominantly I'm paying for StreamYard, which is a cloud-based studio for recording audio and video. I use it for all my interviews. I'm using it now just because it's convenient. It captures the audio and video separately for each person and sends it, captures it locally and sends it all to the cloud, which means if there's a problem with the network, it doesn't matter. I can still make it look good. So that's costing me about 70 New Zealand dollars a month, just a little bit more than that actually, which is quite a lot. The prices have gone up recently, but it's just such a good product. I've been continuing to use it. The other two things I pay for is my editing tool, Descript, which has cut my editing time down and made it more enjoyable. So I'm paying maybe about $20 a month for that. And I'll talk a bit more about that as part of the retro too. And then, of course, I'm paying Buzzsprout, who host my podcast content. They're about $10 a month. It's not a lot of money for that. So yeah, it's costing me over $100 New Zealand a month to produce this podcast, which is, a lot more than it was when I started out. I have to say it was closer to $20 a month when I began. How much money do I make from the podcast? Absolutely nothing. Now, being fully transparent, when I worked for Squared Up a couple of years ago, it was part of my job to make the podcast, so I got paid a salary. So that was effectively being paid for the podcast. Also, for a period of time, Squid Up bought the rights to Slow Reliability as well. So in that respect, for a period of time, I did make money from the podcast, and it actually gave me the job opportunity as well. But now, absolutely no money at all, no sponsorship, and that's been a deliberate decision on my part because I wanted to have complete creative control. I wanted to be able to talk about whatever I want to talk about with whoever I want to talk about it with, and not feel obligated to advertise or to commercialize. The only restriction is I still work for a company, and what I say in effect does reflect that company. So, I have to be mindful of what I'm saying, but that's okay. That's just reality, right? So I make no direct money. It's costing me about 1,200 New Zealand dollars or more a year to produce it, which is probably a bit steep and maybe something I should think about, whether I can reduce that cost somehow. So let's get on to the retrospective itself. Now, in the retro, I'm going to talk about 5 questions. And those questions are, what's going well, or what have I enjoyed? Number 2, what's not going well? What am I frustrated about? Number 3, what have I learned? Number 4, what do I wonder about? And lastly, what am I worried about? I'm going to primarily focus on the last 1 year of the podcast, but I may reference back to the beginning of time, 3 years ago when it all started. So let's start with what is going well. What have I enjoyed? Well, the first thing that came to mind when I thought about this is the absolutely incredible guests that I've had on the show, especially in the last 3 or 4 months. Having John Allspa on the show, that was a bit surreal, honestly. I wouldn't have expected that, 3 years ago. It was awesome. And on top of the caliber of the guests, the interviews themselves have ranged from good to absolutely fantastic. I've enjoyed every single one of them. But I want to say some of the highlights have been the 2 episodes with Michelle Casey, and also episode 95 with Leon Adato about finding a job in tech, which is this unexpectedly delightful episode. I really enjoyed that conversation. But like I said, I've enjoyed them all. I've been able to use the content from the show a little bit of my own work. I don't do a lot of SRE in my current role, but recently I was part of a blameless postmortem of a production issue. And I was actually able to refer to episode 98, the root cause fallacy, with Andrew Hatch as a sort of example or explanation of maybe rather than not just focusing on the root cause, but what can we learn about the system here and what can we improve going forward. So that's been good. In the last 3 or 4 months, I've really enjoyed branching away from pure SRE and observability conversations. My work, it's only really a little bit about SRE at the moment. I'm a tech manager. I look after a team of, at the moment, 12, probably 18 in the next 6 months, doing a variety of things. And none of them are pure SRE. There are elements of it, but just a small amount. So getting to talk about tech leadership and resilience engineering has been fantastic. Resilience is this thing. I feel like I've been searching for this explanation, this framework to talk about these things going on in my brain for 4 or 5 years. And to find the resilience engineering community and to learn more about it it's like an aha, I found it, got it, cool. It's been a nice experience to go through that. I've also really enjoyed this new editing tool, Descript. It is custom built for doing podcasts. It has some AI features. It does amazing things, like it shows the camera of the person talking automatically. It improves the audio quality. It cuts out filler words like and like. It cuts out long, awkward pauses automatically. So many things. It has probably reduced my edit time in half, and the editing that I do is more enjoyable. So I'm really happy that I found Descript, and I'm going to definitely continue to use that. And the last thing I've enjoyed is, I'm a performer, right, at heart. I guess I'm pretty socially awkward at times in small groups, just socializing and even interviewing people at times on the show. But I'm a performer, and I love releasing episodes. I get a kick out of putting the content out there, seeing the comments and engaging with people in the community. Also just watching the view and the listen counts. That's something I get a kick out of and enjoy. So I'll always enjoy releasing new content. So what's not gone well and what's annoyed me or frustrated me? First of all, the show is not as big as I'd like it to be. Sure, it's only a hobby, but it takes a lot of time and focus, and I think I've put quite a bit into increasing the quality of the content, and I'd love to have a consistent over 1,000 downloads per episode of the audio only version. And I am experimenting with ways to sort of build the audience and reading and trying new things out. I definitely want to go further with that. Secondly, I've lost some of the passion to talk about SRE and observability specifically. It's a bit like when I worked as a performance engineer, and I felt like the work had this kind of narrow focus, and I wanted to have a bigger impact or be in discussions about other things happening in the org. And that's when I got into SRE, and that opened all these doorways, and my mind expanded. I'm feeling a little bit about that like that with SRE at the moment, because I don't work very much in that field. And I'm now, as a tech leader, thinking about org structure and the value stream of how we deliver value in our organization and culture and other things which are kind of drawing my attention at the moment. And to go back to talking about observability and SRE, it's not quite been as invigorating for me personally. So that's something to think about, and I'll talk a bit more about that when I wonder about what does this mean? What do I do with this information? Up until February this year, the content I was producing got really inconsistent. When I was at Squared Up, I released an episode every week. It was crazy. And then ideally now I'd like to release an episode every 2 weeks. That's as much as I can do because I have another podcast I release on the off week, right? So I think when I did that period where I was just really busy with work and I just didn't have the energy for the podcast or the passion for it or the drive, that really killed the momentum of the podcast. The numbers went down in terms of viewership and people watching, and I've never really recovered from that, I think. So that hasn't gone so well. In my new role, as I said, the cognitive load is really high. And something that hasn't always gone well is that I finish some days of work and I'm just shattered. And I don't even have the energy to do some of my other hobbies, which are less work than creating a podcast. And that's something I have to balance really carefully. And that's something that I'm working on because work needs to be sustainable. There can be tough days, right? But if every day takes a little bit more from you than it gives back, then you've got to change the balance up. It's a mindset thing. It's what I choose to prioritize. It's a bigger thing I could probably do a whole episode about. But anyway. And the last thing is just a really technical thing just on my mind at the moment. I did an interview with quite a high profile guest recently. I haven't released it, so I won't mention the name. But we had this conversation. And after 15 minutes, I realized I hadn't hit the record button. I'm still embarrassed about that. I feel terrible for sort of wasting their time and having to go through and record again. But that didn't go so well. So what have I learned? Well, other than the content of the episodes, of course, and through the episodes, I've learned many, many things, but the things that come straight to mind, I learned a lot about tech leadership, what it means to be a leader, some of the things you have to deal with as a manager. I've learned about systems thinking and resilience engineering in particular. But beyond that, and if I focus on the podcast itself, I learned about, the power of trying and experimenting with new tools for creating the podcast. Descript has been incredible. Leveraging AI and automation in my process has sped things up and made it more enjoyable. It's not like I just, throw an idea together and it just spits out a podcast at the end. It's still a lot of manual work that I do, but just a little bit of automation goes a long way to making it more enjoyable. I've also recently learned that I need to lift my social media game in terms of promoting the podcast, getting it out there. And Descript is helping there too. So it's got a really fantastic way of turning the episodes that I edit into short form videos. I can create them in about 5 or 10 minutes. It's super easy and they're of a high quality, and it's something I'm going to do a lot more of going forward. So that's great. But also just in general, like thinking about, I recently read The Diary of a CEO by Steve Bartlett. It talks about the importance of the first 5 seconds. So really thinking about what is the first thing I'm going to say? What is the first thing I'm going to write when I post on social media, and just being more thoughtful about that. So what do I wonder about? So something I have wondered about for a while, and I made a decision on, is it time to bring back some more solo content? When this started, the whole podcast was solo. It was just public learning. It was me. I've got an idea. I've got a question. Something doesn't make sense, and I'd sit down and record my thoughts. Sometimes those thoughts were a bit controversial, or I would question something from a kind of innocent perspective of, what does this mean? And I think there's something about that people enjoyed and engage with, and I have not done that for a couple of years now. So almost every single episode I've done in recent memory, other than I think at the very beginning of this year, has been with a guest talking about a topic, right? So I'd like to bring back the solo content, but keep it short form, aiming for 10 or 15 minutes, and not being afraid to have a perspective or an opinion and to talk about something that's just on my mind that I care about. I think that will help. Not only it'll give the audience something else, you as the audience, something that you have not had for a while, and that I know that some people enjoy that content. It also gives me a chance to reflect on my work and to vocalize the things that are on my mind that I'm concerned about or that I'm excited by. And to probably get a bit more discussion going as well. Because of this thing where I am less engaged with SRE and observability in particular, and I'm thinking more broadly about, tech and leadership and how we deliver value and how we operate, technology systems and complexity of systems, all these other things. I wonder whether it's time to maybe rebrand or reboot the podcast as more of a general tech podcast. I don't know. It's a scary prospect because Slight Reliability it's the identity of this podcast. Maybe I still call it that, but I reboot it in terms of the content and it's something I don't want to just decide by myself. I want to engage with you as the audience to find out, what do you want? What kind of content are you interested in? Because I'd rather have a small podcast with an engaged audience who are getting something out of it than to make a generic tech podcast which no one really cares about. Third thing I wonder about is, how do I engage more with you as the community? How do I give you more opportunities to feel part of the show and to contribute to it? Because it started out as a very personal thing for me, and it is still personal, but it's bigger than me now, right? There is a community of people who have been on the show, 56 guests, plus lots of people I talk to online and comment on the episodes and start conversations. It's so much bigger than just me now. So I feel like a duty of care as well. So how do I give you all more of a chance to contribute to it? How do I engage the community? These are things, the skills I don't necessarily know what to do. So how do I do that? And lastly, how do I grow the show? So obviously I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. I have a bit of a plan, but I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm trying some experiments and I'm reading and listening to advice from what I've read. What am I worried about? Interesting. So I don't know. It probably doesn't come across in the show, but I still have a lot of self-doubt. I get nervous before some of the interviews that I do. Really nervous. I find especially some of the more high-profile guests who maybe have important positions in their organizations or are well-known in the industry, I get really nervous about them still. I'd love to be able to, let that go a little bit. I've been doing this for a long time. I've interviewed John Allspar and Niall Murphy and all kinds of people, and just to, enjoy it more. And I think that it's better for me and it's better for the guests if I'm relaxed and just more conversational and can focus on getting the best out of each guest. And that starts with me being more comfortable, right? I worry that keeping the podcast going might become less of a hobby and a way to relax. It's more of a different kind of work. So that's something I just need to balance, right? It has felt like that in the past. This year, branching away from just pure SRE and observability has sort of stopped that from happening. It's revitalized my engagement and interest in doing the podcast. But I have to keep that in mind, right? I have to make sure that I'm talking about things and doing things which are genuinely engaging me and things I want to talk about. Otherwise, if it just becomes a chore, then I'm going to resent it, and that's no good for anyone. And on the flip side, I also worry that the content that I want to produce, which is creatively satisfying for me, isn't what you as the audience expect or necessarily want. So that's another concern that I have. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to do about that one, but that's just something that I worry about a bit. So that's the retrospective, right? And I've got two more things I want to cover. The first one is I want to do some thank yous, and then I want to talk about what's next and what can we learn from this retrospective and what am I going to do next, right? First thing is I wanted to say some thank yous, and I want to call out a specific person, Michelle Casey, who I've already mentioned, for introducing me to the resilience engineering community and introducing me to the majority of the guests who've come on the show in the last, half year or so. It really has been an evolution in my thinking and being connected with that community and all the ideas and the learning has really helped me. So thank you, Michelle. You've really kind of changed the trajectory of this podcast in a way. I also want to thank all the other guests who've come on in the last year and going back to the beginning for your generosity, coming on the show, sharing your experiences. Sometimes I get guests that come to me and they want to talk about their tool or their product, and I talk them down and say, I don't do that. You can talk about an idea, but you can't talk about your product necessarily. And people are so generous. They come and they just go, okay, that's fine. We'll just talk about these ideas. So thank you for kind of respecting the show for what it is. But most of all, thank you for everyone who has listened to the show, who's provided feedback, who's engaged with the content online and or talked to me, messaged me directly and asked about it, or offered to come on the show. It really does mean a lot. So thank you so much. So what is next for Slight Reliability? I guess the short answer is I don't know yet. I have a plan of some things I'd like to experiment with. I'm not going to rebrand the show or reboot it just yet, but that is something I would love to get your feedback on. I've done it once before. This show used to be called Performance Time, and it was all about performance testing and engineering. And the content is all gone now. I just renamed it Slight Reliability one day, and to avoid confusion, when I moved to Squared Up and they bought the rights to Slight Reliability, all the Performance Time content is gone. It's still on YouTube somewhere on a different channel, but I've done it before and it worked out pretty well. But at the same time, I'm a bit scared to let go of what it is today. So we're just going to continue on with Slight Reliability and see where it takes us. So some of the stuff I want to do, of course, I mentioned I'm going to revive the solo content of that sort of 10 to 15 minute variety, focusing on letting myself be a bit opinionated at times, to have a stronger voice, to speak my mind, to talk about the things which are taking real estate in my mind day to day. I want to stop being so precious about not asking for help, asking for people to rate or review or like or subscribe to the podcast. So I'm probably going to start mentioning that from time to time at the start or the end of episodes, hopefully not in a cheesy, annoying way. I'm going to try and make more of the artwork. It's funny, guests that come on the show and people I talk to, probably 50% of the time, the thing which is most prominent about Slight Reliability, it's not the podcast, it's the artwork. So I do have the artwork and I draw unique pieces of MS Paint, pixely artwork for every single episode. So how can I make more of that? I don't quite know yet how that's going to work. I started something recently where I post a picture of the art as a teaser and sort of say to the audience, say to you, what do you think the show's going to be about and who my guest is going to be? So that's one thing I'm trying. But I want to find more ways to get more out of their artwork because people enjoy it. If you weren't aware, I do have an Instagram account and every single piece of artwork created for the podcast is on that Instagram account. It's just at Slight_Reliability. if you wanted to find it. Plus, it's in the description of this show. I want to create short form content from each episode to spread the word. And when, just generally, some of these short 1 or 2 minute snippets of incredible ideas and content, just to get it out there to more people. So I've started doing that in literally the last 3 or 4 weeks. So I've got content going on YouTube Shorts, Instagram, and TikTok more recently as well. So that's something I'm trying. I'm also using Blue Sky. So Blue Sky, I went off Twitter when it all went a bit, political in the way I don't like. So I've gone to Blue Sky. I have such a small audience on Blue Sky. It's like 90 something followers, right? But I'm going to use Blue Sky as a sandbox to try more experimental ideas maybe, or to engage with the community in a different way, try something new, a bit avant-garde. So that's another idea I have. So that's a few of the things that I've got in my plan for the podcast. Nothing dramatically changing. Definitely going to keep doing content which doesn't necessarily fit just the SRE or observability definition. So if you're hoping for just that, I'm sorry. I can't just talk about that because there's so much more that I think needs to be discussed. So that's the retrospective. Slight reliability, how it's going, how I feel about it, what's going well and what's not, and a little bit about what I'm thinking about in the future. So I guess I would love to hear from you as the audience. What do you think? Where do you want the podcast to go? What are you liking about things that are happening today that you don't want to change? What would you like to see more of? And how do you feel about the fact that I've sort of talked about things such as how I feel about not wanting to do just SRE or observability content? I want to talk about more things, How do you feel about that? Is that okay? Yeah. So thank you for tuning into this very different episode of Slight Reliability. I hope that you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.